Today I'm cooking from Betty Crocker's new Dinner for Two cookbook. This book was published in 1964, and I know a lot of you are big fans of it, so we will definitely talk about it a little bit later. I know a lot of you like it when I make small quantities of food for a smaller household, so these recipes in this book, they're catered for mostly 2 people. You'll get a few that are a little bit bigger for maybe 4 people, but I'm gonna be preparing a side dish, a main dish, and a dessert. So we're gonna try to get all the cooking done all today. Let's see if I can do it. I'm actually gonna start with the side dish because it needs a little bit of fridge time. So the side dish I'm making is this creamy coleslaw recipe, but the main reason that I chose it is because it is made with this creamy boiled dressing. I don't believe I've ever made boiled dressing before. This one makes a very small quantity. It only makes 1/3 of a cup because it's for 2 people. So I wanted to give it a try, but I didn't want to make a huge amount just in case it's not my thing. I have this little pan of water that is simmering on the stove. And the reason I have that is because this dressing is cooked over a double boiler. So just get a pan, put a little water in it, and you can bring it to a boil and then turn it down a bit. And then you can just put a bowl over it like that. I happen to have this one that fit perfectly over my little pan. The instructions are mix ingredients in the top of a double boiler. Okay, and those ingredients are 1/4 cup of sour cream. Commercial sour cream is what the book says, but that's what this is. It's not like soured cream or sour milk. I have 1 egg yolk here, which, you know, I broke, but it's okay. It's gonna get mixed. I have a tablespoon of vinegar. I went apple cider vinegar, even though it didn't indicate like what kind exactly, because when my grandma made coleslaw, she always used apple cider vinegar. I'm actually gonna start mixing that together, and I'm wearing a glove because this bowl is hot. You know, you can also use a glass bowl over your double boiler. Sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Oh, and you can see it's already starting to thicken up. 1/4 teaspoon of dry mustard. Ooh, this is happening fast. Okay. And you don't want to scramble the egg. That's why you're kind of like cooking this very gently over some simmering water. 1 more ingredient, and that is just a dash of pepper. Basically, that's it. It is already thickening up. And you just kind of whisk this until it's thick, and then you can pour it in a jar and keep it in the refrigerator until you're ready to use it. So next I'm gonna work on dessert, and dessert is spicy pumpkin custard. So appropriate for this time of year, and I just so happen to have leftover pumpkin from those pumpkin cookies I made in my Halloween video. If you haven't watched that, it's a long one, so you know, if you're a fan of Halloween, you might enjoy it. I'll link it in the description down below. Spicy pumpkin custard. It is indeed spicy. It has cinnamon, cloves, ginger. What is the other one? Allspice? Cinnamon, cloves, ginger, nutmeg. Sorry, it took me a second. Oh man, okay. Heat oven to 350, I'm working on that now. That is heating up. It says blend all ingredients together with a rotary beater. It may surprise you to hear that I do have a hand mixer, but I do not have a rotary beater. When I'm doing this, that's what I'm doing. I'll insert a photo of one here. So I'm gonna use a whisk. Hopefully I can do a good enough job. We start with 1/2 cup of mashed cooked pumpkin. This is canned pumpkin. This is not pumpkin pie filling. They are different. And again, it was left over from my last video. We have 1/4 teaspoon of salt and 1/3 cup of evaporated milk. Again with the evaporated milk. This is the season for it, isn't it? 1 egg yolk. Yes, another egg yolk. I didn't break this one. This one's looking pretty good. But it's gonna get mixed up anyway, so it doesn't matter. I have 2½ tablespoons of granulated sugar, and then 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon. Oh my gosh, that cinnamon smells so good. And then just little pinches of ginger, nutmeg, and cloves. I remembered this time. And I'm gonna give this all a mix before I add the last ingredient. I just wanna get this sort of incorporated. Oh, it smells so good. Very pumpkin-y. Oh, this is such an appropriate dessert for this time of year. And it's gonna be it's like a warm custard baked dessert, which I love. I'm thinking it's gonna be like pumpkin pie without the crust. So you don't have to worry about making pastry. Final ingredient is 1½ teaspoons of butter. Now I used softened butter, and I don't really know exactly how this is gonna like incorporate. So I wanted to mix everything else up first. It's probably just gonna be like little lumps or flecks of butter in here. So I'm gonna mix it very well, or as well as I can. Yeah, it's just like little pieces of butter. So likely they will just melt right in there. In fact, you could probably cut the butter into like little squares so that it evenly distributes a little bit more without you even having to like break it up. That would be my recommendation. You know, is it the right one? I don't know, because I've never made this recipe before. So I'm gonna get this out of the way, and I am gonna come on in with my pan. So I have 2 custard cups in here. I'll show you those. They're clear, so you can't really see them. And then I have this little dish. I think it's like a 7x11 Pyrex dish. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna pour this mixture into your custard cups, put the custard cups in the dish, and then you're gonna pour some water around it. And it doesn't say like simmering water or hot water, it just says water. So I'm going like room temp water. And then you're gonna bake it. So it's kind of like a little water bath situation. Probably gonna need this. And in case you didn't know, these little side things on the Cinderella bowls, one is big, one is small, and you can use them as pour spouts, which is why, you know, I like using these bowls for one reason, the other being they're really cute and really fun. Okay, I'm gonna divvy this up the best I can. I'm probably gonna get a little on the counter though. We don't mind. We don't mind. I hope this turns out because I'm excited about it. Place these into your dish. This is a pretty small dish. You know, you only need room for 2. You probably don't want to get anything too large. And like I said, I'm not using hot water. I'm just using this kettle that I haven't heated up to pour the water because it's so much easier if you have something to pour with. So it says 1 inch of water. Okay, it's like halfway up the side of this baking dish. Well, this is going to be easy enough for me to manage and lift and put in the oven. But if you're doing something where you have to make a lot of little custard cups that you have to cook in a water bath, one of the tricks that I've seen is that people actually place this with the custard cups empty, like there's no water. They place in the oven and then they add the water, which it can be so hard to manage, like a very wobbly water-filled dish that's large. But in this case, I'm gonna be able to just handle it. So my oven just alerted me it is preheated. I have to bake this for 45 minutes. The dressing for my coleslaw is sitting in the fridge. The dessert, my pumpkin custard, is baking in the oven. So now I'm actually gonna start making the main dish, which is this hamburger pie. The hamburger pie and the pumpkin custard actually like bake at the same temperature, which is very convenient. The first step in making this hamburger pie is to cook some onion in a tablespoon of oil. And I have 2 tablespoons of chopped onion. I'm gonna put that in the pan. I'm going to cook that until it is softened. Onion is starting to soften, so now I'm gonna add 1/2 pound of ground beef. Kind of mash that up. This is another thing that was left from my last video. I only needed 1/2 pound for that recipe for the stuffed peppers, and I only needed 1/2 pound for this recipe, so it was kind of perfect. I love it when that happens. And it happened because I planned it that way. Okay, that is all cooked through, and I did end up draining just a little bit of the fat away. So now I need to add my seasonings, and that is 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of MSG, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of pepper. I also have a cup of canned green beans and 1/2 can of condensed tomato soup, and that's gonna act as our sauce. And in regards to the 1/2 can of tomato soup, I love this little note in the cookbook. It says, dilute and heat remaining 1/2 can of soup for lunch the next day. That's probably what I'm gonna do, actually. So now that this is all mixed together, I just need to pour it into a 1-quart casserole dish. And this is the 1-quart casserole I've chosen to use. It's somewhat new to my collection. I bought this in August when we went on a trip to Saugatuck. The design is called Country Festival. It's Corningware. And this is one that I've wanted to add to my collection for a while, so I was really excited to get it. So I'm just gonna pour this into my very cute casserole dish. Pumpkin custard is out of the oven. I had to add an extra 10 minutes of cook time to this, and you know it's done. You can actually see where I already did this. I'll just do it next to it. Whoops, we're steaming up. We'll do it from back here. So you have to insert a knife into the custard. If it comes out clean, then you know it's done. But it does have to cool for at least 20 minutes, which kind of works out for me because I need to bake the hamburger pie for 30 minutes. So the next step in my hamburger pie, I actually have to make some instant mashed potatoes. I managed to find some Betty Crocker instant mashed potatoes, and that just goes on top of the pie. It says you can use homemade mashed potatoes, leftover mashed potatoes, or instant, and I'm going instant. Now, I did this in kind of the wrong order, but it's gonna be just fine. Prepare your instant mashed potatoes according to package directions. I was actually supposed to boil the water before adding the milk and butter, and I just put it all in here. So I'm kind of letting this come to a simmer, which, there you go. And I actually have to turn the heat off and then add the potato flakes. Stir it up. Oh, it's thickening up. You can feel it. Well, I can feel it. You can't. You can see it, I hope. But anyway, now that that is combined, I have to cover it and let these sit for a couple of minutes to complete the cooking. All right, I've got my mashed potatoes right here. They're nice and thick. You can see. I'm supposed to use 1 cup of mashed potatoes. Am I gonna measure? No. I'm just gonna put some on top of the hamburger pie. Smooth it out. Make it nice. And I'm gonna have some mashed potatoes left. Those are probably gonna be like part of a random lunch or something another day. Sometimes my lunches look a little random, just depending on what I'm doing. I see like a little peeking through there, so we're just gonna cover it on up. I think we've got it. The last step before this goes into the oven is to sprinkle with a little bit of paprika. Again, I always think I have like a shaker cap on this and I just don't. That's about the second time probably that I have almost dumped a whole bunch of paprika on top of something in one of my videos. I'm just gonna like take a little bit. I'm just gonna sprinkle some on top. Oh, it smells good. I love the smell of paprika. We got it, folks. There's what it looks like. And now I have to bake this at 350 degrees for 20 minutes. Okay, to recap, my pumpkin custard is on the counter cooling over here. Hamburger pie is baking in the oven. By the way, I said bake it 20 minutes, it's 30. I looked at a different recipe that was like on the next page that involved hamburger. So bake your hamburger pie for 30 minutes at 350. And I thought, you know, we're kind of in a place where it'd be a good time to mix up my creamy coleslaw. So I have 1.5 cups of shredded cabbage in a bowl. Did I use the pre-shredded kind of cabbage? You bet I did. Take the shortcut if you want to take it. You can shred your own cabbage as well, and it does give instructions on exactly how to do that in the book, but I just bought this. And I'm supposed to add this entire 1/3 of a cup of dressing to this. And I'm not really positive I want to do all of it, so we're gonna start with a little bit, and then I'm gonna mix it. We'll see. Let's see. It might also be a good idea to mix this, pop it back in the fridge, and then if I want to refresh it a little bit, I can add more dressing. I like to do that with deli salads sometimes. Really not a lot left in here though. They might have had those proportions right. So we're gonna go for it. Now I tasted a little bit of the dressing on its own and it is pretty good. It is very tangy and delicious. I don't know if I would do this all the time to make coleslaw. You know, my basic coleslaw dressing is like a mixture of mayonnaise, vinegar, sugar, salt, and pepper. That's kind of what I do. But this was really tangy and tasty, a little bit different, a little creamier than what I would normally do. Okay, this is pretty well mixed, so I'm just gonna put this back in the fridge until it's time to plate everything up. Plate all done right there. This is kind of a late lunch for me, so I'm super excited to taste everything. Also, I'm fighting with the light right now. You can kind of see. I don't know. That's what happens in the fall, and I'll figure it out. I'm actually gonna start with the side dish. So this is the coleslaw. The dressing itself was very tangy and creamy and good. Really tangy. I like it. It kind of reminds me of like a diner coleslaw, kind of. I don't know if that means anything to you. So I took everything else off, but I've got my hamburger pie here. This makes 2 generous servings according to the recipe. You could probably get more like 3 out of it, depending on how hungry you are. But it's kind of complete because it's got like your vegetable in here, it's got the potatoes on the top, it's got meat. So a nice little casserole. That is warm and comforting. It is very nostalgic. Yeah, I definitely ate something like this growing up. Very well seasoned as well. That's tasty, I like that a lot. Now the pumpkin custard, it's like not as beautiful as I necessarily want it to be, but I just have a feeling it's gonna taste good. Also, I was supposed to try and like invert this onto a plate, and I do not believe that is gonna work. So we're just gonna eat it right out of this cup. Yeah, it's like a pumpkin pie filling kind of thing. That's good. And they really did mean spicy pumpkin custard, because I can taste all of those like warm spices in there. So delicious, so right for this season. And I did admittedly kind of think the butter part was like weird, but I used salted butter, so it's really tasty. Like it just complements everything. It's so good. If you wanted to make this even more special, you could probably put a little bit of whipped cream or ice cream on top, but it's delicious as is, I must say. So I did a complete meal, and I'm gonna enjoy it, and then I'll come back later and talk about the cookbook. Betty Crocker's new Dinner for Two cookbook was published in 1964, and I have some similar cookbooks from other decades. Similar, but not the same. I have Betty Crocker's Dinner for Two cookbook. I think this was 1958, yes. This is one of the cookbooks that was illustrated by Charlie Harper, and then I also have Betty Crocker's Dinner for Two cookbook from 1973. So several similar cookbooks. They are different. They're not quite the same. This is the one we're going to be focusing on today. I know I've cooked from this cookbook at least one other time on this channel, if not more. Not sure. I never actually thought I would make quite as many videos as I have, and that it would come to the point where I cannot remember exactly which books I've cooked from, but here we are. This one is such a beautiful example of a cookbook from the 1960s. Just the colors, this blue, and the table settings, and the illustrations inside. I mean, I'm definitely going to show you a lot of those. I've always loved this bouquet of flowers, and it matches pretty much. It's very similar to the one that's pictured in the photograph on the front of the book. We've got Betty's portrait here. If you go to the Betty Crocker website, you can see how Betty's portrait has evolved over the years. The latest one, I believe, is from 1994 or 95. I always get that mixed up, but there hasn't been a new one since, so I don't know what's going on there, if they're ever going to come out with another one. And I love in a lot of these types of cookbooks where it opens with a letter from Betty, and it's like this is her handwriting, you know? It's, again, I know I have to say it sometimes. I know Betty Crocker is not real, but I mean, they created this whole persona for her. General Mills did, and it included this handwriting. So iconic. I mean, this Betty Crocker is what you see on General Mills products. The copy I have included some very amazing newspaper clippings. I think I've talked about these in one of the other videos where I cooked from this book. Just quickly, this one is like, dinner can wait, an electric tray's the secret. And this is actually from Ladies' Home Journal. You can kind of see it across the top if the camera will focus on it. I just love old magazine clippings and old magazines in general. Of course I do. So a lot of times if I get a cookbook and it has stuff like this in there, I just leave it. And then I find it again and enjoy it. Yeah, the color schemes in this and just the way that the table settings look like this, you know, tablescaping, table setting, very important. It's not something that I excel at or even do very often, but you know, on a special occasion, maybe it's fun. Maybe it's a fun thing. Here's another fun table setting too. If you can imagine this cookbook being given to like newlyweds, maybe they're just setting up their household and they're getting out their dishes and setting the table for company to come over. And here's a page that says, variety, the spice of any dinner. And what they're talking about is changing things up by a change of scene, like eating a meal in a different area of your house, or adding a special item to the menu, matching beverages to the weather. There's lots of advice here for different things you can do to make dinner a little bit more exciting. And a 2-page spread about table setting. I'm a big fan of these 2-color illustrations. I've talked about that before. And the 2-color illustrations that they have in here are black and pastels. So it's like pastel yellow, pastel green, pastel pink, reflective of the time with those pastels. So we have a good balanced mix of photographs of the food and illustrations. There's a chapter called Frankly Thrifty. Menus that are thrifty. They don't cost a lot per serving. Maybe this will have to come out next year, next January, when I continue my budget recipe series, because I am planning to do that for the entire month of January, just a heads up. you all seem to love that last year, so we're doing it again. I love these plates right here. The border, like the leaves. I don't know what the pattern is called. If you do, please let me know in the comments, but I've always loved that like leaf pattern. There's a textiles designer called Orla Kiley, and she does leaf patterns in that way, and I've always loved them. If you had these as your dishes, please tell me. I love it when I have dishes or you see pictures of dishes on my videos and you tell me like, that's the wedding china I got for a gift, or you know, those are the dishes my parents had growing up. I do love to hear about that. I think it's so interesting. Oh, these are good too. I've seen these plates before. This is one of those cookbooks that I could just sit and look through for a long time. It has the type of binding that I like, this wire ring. I know it's not everyone's favorite because those double wire rings can sometimes rust, but I am lucky with this copy. They are in good shape. And then there's this chapter called So You're Back to Two. Just in my mind, I often do associate this cookbook with newlyweds, but this chapter, So You're Back to Two, mean your children have moved out of the house and it's just you and your partner, and you know, maybe you have to relearn how to cook for a small number of people. Not always easy. It took me a while. Like growing up, it's not like we had a huge immediate family, but I always learned to cook in large quantities. So it did take me a little while, you know, when I moved out and got married, to figure out how to make recipes for two. It sounds like it's so easy, like you should be able to do it, but it's just not always something that you can easily transition to if you're used to cooking in bigger quantities. Another fantastic plate sighting, by the way. Yeah, I could show you every single plate and every single casserole dish in this entire book. Too many good things here. Ooh, salads. I love the way this photo looks. Those very neatly arranged salad plates, and they're, you know, taken from above. And there's even a little section called What Every Kitchen Needs. So if you're setting up household, you've got different categories for baking, for measuring, things that are nice to have, maybe not essential. And it just has a list of like things you're gonna need in your kitchen. I think that's very helpful. And there is a glossary at the end. Again, super helpful, this cookbook. I wanted to do this type of video where I just cook an entire meal because I don't do them super often. Sometimes I'll do a full day of meals, or I know last Christmas I did a holiday brunch video. That was one meal that I cooked all in like one sitting. But I wanted to do it this way and leave it in the order in which I did everything. Sometimes when I'm cooking, if I'm doing like 2 recipes at a time, you know, maybe something will be baking and I'll be mixing something else, but I'll chop up that footage so that I can kind of like keep each section an individual recipe. So it'll be this recipe, you know, this recipe and this recipe. Where in this case, I was doing all of it all at once. And I wanted to show it kind of in that order, just to give you a little bit of an idea of how things can sometimes go in my kitchen when I'm filming. But it was really fun. And this meal actually was so good. So I guess I'll just talk about the recipes I made today. The first recipe I started cooking was the creamy coleslaw with boiled dressing. I loved that dressing. I thought it was very good. It had a nice vinegary tang to it, but it was also tangy because of the sour cream. You get kind of both of those flavors. And then the sugar really comes in to sort of balance things out for you. Not my usual coleslaw dressing. Usually I don't do like a cooked or a boiled dressing, but this one was really good too. A little bit different. The flavor was definitely a bit more intense and the texture was a little bit more creamy. I would like to make this dressing again and make coleslaw, but I would like to make it with some like green apples mixed in. There was a restaurant near our apartment when we lived in Chicago, and they had the best apple slaw. I know when I first saw it, I was like, I am not gonna like this. I loved it. That is like such a memorable thing for me. We haven't lived there in over 10 years. And that restaurant, Birchwood Kitchen, is long gone, but I always loved ordering that apple slaw. I think that dressing would also go really well on a kale salad, and maybe kale is not your favorite. I wouldn't say it's something that I just really intensely disliked, but it's something that I have sort of incorporated more into what I eat, and I do enjoy it a lot. You have to do some special preparation for it, but it does hold up really well, especially if you're gonna make a salad ahead of time. You can actually mix it up, put some of the dressing in there, and it's such a like robust green that it does hold everything really well without getting soggy. So maybe I'll try that boiled dressing again and some other applications. The second recipe I started was the spicy pumpkin custard that I made for dessert. And I also feel like this video just kind of shows you that maybe it's not so straightforward, like the order in which you are going to be making a dinner. You know, if you've been cooking for a long time or you're used to cooking, like maybe you kind of know like times to start things, but it's not like you make the main dish all at once, you make the side dish all at once, and you make the dessert all at once. If you're doing lots of different things all at the same time, it can be hard. It can be hard to plan those things out, but you eventually kind of learn and get used to it, and you just kind of like make it part of your cooking routine. And I think that's especially important when you have the holidays coming up. Like we have Thanksgiving coming up, we have Christmas, etc. coming up, where maybe you're cooking a big meal for your family and friends, and there's a lot going on. So, you know, something to think about, to plan ahead a little bit when you are making a menu. But anyway, that pumpkin custard, it was good. I really, really liked it. I had the other one today for dessert with my lunch. The texture of the custard itself, so good. Very smooth and creamy, and those spices were delicious in there. If you don't like all of those extra spices, you could probably cut back or just throw in maybe like cinnamon and pumpkin pie spice. I happen to love all of those flavors, and you know, if they're a little bit intense, I'm okay with it. It was delicious warm. Oh my gosh, it was so good. You have to let it cool for at least 20 minutes. I probably went longer than that, but it was so warm when I ate it, and there's like a little bit of that salted butter on top. The butter though, okay, let's talk about the butter. It was fine when you eat the custard warm, but I had the other one today and it was cold. I got it from the fridge. Delicious cold, but the butter, like the excess butter, does make a bit of like, I don't know, there's like a little thin layer of it on top that's not super pleasant to eat when it's coming straight from the fridge. Just to sort of like satisfy my own curiosity, I decided to look up some pumpkin custard recipes online. I do that sometimes just to compare and see like what's different. Pumpkin custard that was very similar to what I made did not have that butter in it. So I'm not really completely sure of the purpose. And I thought, I'm like, maybe I did this wrong. Maybe I was supposed to grease the custard cups with the butter, and no, you mix it in. So I really think that this recipe would be just fine without the butter. There's such a small quantity in there. If you want to put it in and you're going to eat the custard warm, I think it's fine. But if it's something that you're going to make ahead of time, I'd say, you know, either leave it out if you're going to eat the custard cold, or you're going to want to warm the custard up in the microwave or something. But overall, delicious. It was really good, and I, of course, appreciated the small quantity that it made. And finally, my main dish was hamburger pie. And I said as I was tasting this dish was so nostalgic for me. I ate something very similar growing up. We didn't call it hamburger pie, and it was kind of deconstructed from what this was. So my mom would make this like hamburger tomato kind of mixture, almost like a sloppy joe mixture, but not really. And we would eat it over mashed potatoes. And of course, we probably have a vegetable on the side, probably green beans. So it was like that, but this was like a casserole. And this particular flavor of this casserole was so good. Very simple ingredients, stuff I mostly had on hand. I mean, the soup and the green beans I had in my pantry. I had some hamburger in my freezer left over from another recipe, and some potatoes in my pantry. All of it came together to make just a really warm, comforting meal. Not super expensive either. I think this is a pretty budget-friendly recipe, especially depending on what kind of meat you use. Maybe ground turkey is more affordable where you live. You know, I usually buy some on sale and I'll put it in my freezer. You could easily swap in ground turkey. You could also make this vegetarian if you wanted to use some veggie crumbles. If you're kind of looking for that like delicious, comforting, kind of warm casserole meal, I think this is a really good one. And I appreciated that it was more of a complete meal because it had a vegetable in there, it had your meat, and it had some potatoes on top. I made a side dish to go with it, but you know, you wouldn't necessarily have to. Now, I believe I have made a hamburger pie. I can't remember if it was called hamburger pie in a very early video from a Better Homes and Gardens cookbook, and I didn't enjoy that one as much. I'll have to look back and see, but I think that was like a very similar recipe. This one was better. This one tasted better. You know, it was seasoned a little bit more. Like it was good. I actually took the rest of it because I had some of it for a late lunch. And I popped some of it in the freezer for another future lunch just to see, you know, how that's going to turn out. I haven't had that yet, but I suspect that it's going to reheat just fine. anything I can make in one of my cute 1-quart casserole dishes too, like I'm in, right? So if you were looking for any inspiration on some recipes or meals that you can make for just 2 people, I hope you found some here. If you love cookbooks and recipes from Betty Crocker, I have an entire playlist and I'll link it in the description down below. I'd like to say a special thank you to my Patreon supporters. If you'd like to join us over there, I'll leave a link in the description so that you can do that. I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I post videos about food, vintage cookbooks, and retro recipes every week. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.